from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Through this world of toil and snares, if I falter, Lord, who cares? Who with me my burden shares? None but Thee, dear Lord, none but Thee. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. When my feeble life is o'er, time for me will be no more. Guide me gently, safely o'er to Thy kingdom shore, to Thy shore. Just a closer walk with Thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to Thee. Let it be, dear Lord, let it be. Sing the wondrous love of Jesus, sing His mercy and His grace. In the mansions bright and blessed, He'll prepare for us a place. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. While we walk the pilgrim pathway, clouds will overspread the sky. But when traveling days are over, not a shadow, not a sign. When
Local groups of people in various places, local churches is what we refer to them as. We then talked about we have individual responsibilities. However, we also have I want to say shared responsibilities. We have shared responsibilities that can only be done when we are together. And doing the individual obligations doesn't supplant the shared obligations, or doing the shared obligations doesn't do away with the individual obligations. It's both that we are called to be. And then we talked about the local church existing for worship and growth at the end of the discussion this morning. We want to pick up there tonight, and I actually am going to have to break this for just a minute and select a different slide. So we have the right picture behind us and the right title. The local church is here to provide something for Christians, and that is, at least in part, it provides accountability and it provides care. Congregations have to know who is among them. In order for it to work right, there must be an identifiable group of people. In 1 Corinthians 5:12, there's a lot of places you can go to make this point, but I've chose 1 Corinthians 5:12. 1 Corinthians 5:12, he speaks to the church that was at Corinth, and he says, do you not judge those who are within the church? Now, to set the context, what he's saying here is your job isn't to judge those who are outside of the body. You are to judge those who are within the church. Do you not judge those who are within the church? Now, what that means is that the Corinthians had to be able to recognize who was part of the congregation and who was not, in order for them to know those people that they were obligated to judge and those people that they were obligated not to judge. This requires identifiable fellowship, and it requires participation. Um, Somebody coming in the room one time while we're assembled, and then we never see them again, not identified with us. No one in any, well, there are some groups that would claim membership of people just for walking in the door, but that is not. No one in their right mind would go, oh, that's a person that belongs here. Even coming once or twice over the course of a year or two is not going to create that awareness. And maybe even coming every week, depending on how engaged you are and other things, may or may not identify a direct connection and association with the work. So we need to think about that. The New Testament doesn't describe disconnected Christianity without responsibility of other believers. In fact, it says that we have obligations. We're commanded. We're commanded to care for one another. Galatians 6:2 is just one example. Bear one another's burdens and thus fulfill the law of Christ. Now, that last phrase is extremely important because what it says is if we do not bear one another's burdens, we are not fulfilling the law of Christ. And so this is a command and obligation that we have to bear one another's burdens. It requires more than just occasional contact. It requires more than just a passing awareness of someone. The local church is where needs become known, where prayers are offered for one another, where burdens are literally shared, where the weight and the trouble and the hardship of the thing is taken and carried by someone else in the vein of the one who bore the cross for Jesus. Encouragement is given. Right here is where I want to say, I think I mentioned it to Wesley this morning. It may have been David. It was David this morning after service. The stuff that goes on before the assembly, the walking around and the talking and the visiting and the stuff that goes on after the assembly. And man, I'm thrilled about this. I'm gonna tell you, I'm thrilled that the number of people that are hanging around after services and talking and visiting and engaging with one another is thrilling to me. I'm gonna tell you why, because that is just as important in this respect as the worship assembly is, because that is where we really get to know one another. That is where we really find out the things that one another are facing and the help that one another needs. And we really develop relationships and friendships beyond just knowing that it's somebody that sits on the other side of the room. Um, Being able, well, I'll just say it this way. This is so important because isolation from this kind of association leaves people spiritually vulnerable. It's what causes people to stumble. It's what causes people to fall and not be able to regain their footing. I had a friend who had a medical condition that caused him great difficulty in walking. On more than one occasion, he fell and was just left. He didn't live with anybody. And one time it happened in a city park. He was out walking, taking his daily exercise, and he fell and was out there for 4 hours in the sun by himself with no one to help him up. Another occasion, he fell in his home, and it was 2 days before anyone found him and was able to help him. What was true for him physically happens to us spiritually as well. And if we remain isolated from one another and do not have the kind of ties and the kind of connection that the Bible describes the church having, there is no one there to bear our burden. There is no one there to lift us up when we fall. There is no one there to help protect us from the problem in the first place. Look, the greater thing would have been not that there was someone there to pick Pat up. The greater thing would have been for there to have been someone there to keep him from falling in the first place. The local church participates in the work of God. Congregations spread the gospel. Timothy was written a letter that he was to inform him in the teaching that he did as a preacher. And he was told that the things that were being written to him was so that one knew how they ought to conduct themselves in the household of God, which is the pillar and support of the truth. The stand in which the truth is set on to be seen. The church at Antioch sent men into the field. We talked about that briefly this morning. Acts 13, verses 1 through 3. They sent Paul and Barnabas out to preach. The Thessalonians spread the word of the Lord. Thessalonians 1:8 said that the word had sounded forth from them so far that Paul, when he wrote to them, said that there was no need of him to even say anything because they had sounded forth the word. The Philippians supported Paul's work. Philippians chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. The local church is not simply a place where we gather. It is a body that works together to share the truth, to put the truth on display, to expose people to the revelation of God in a way that they cannot be exposed to it through anyone or anywhere else. Congregations care for the saints. Acts 6 gives a great record of care being given to some needy widows. And there's something else that's important about that context that I think we need to understand, and it connects with what we talked about this morning, and the fact that, well, it connects even with the passage that Leo read tonight in the scripture reading. The fact that some people are good and apt at one thing, and some people are good and apt at another thing, and some people, now this is a different, it has nothing to do with aptitude, has nothing to do with skill. Some people have obligations to do some things and therefore can't do other things, and therefore other people need to be identified who have the obligation to that. That's what happens in Acts 6. They come to the apostles with this problem. The apostles say this is something definitely that needs to be done, but we can't do that because we have our own things to do. So we need to find other people among us who can care and take this task. And other men are chosen to do the care to the widows, who are the Hellenist widows. So the apostles were free to do the work that God had charged them to do. Each part of the body doing its part to the working of the whole. That's what was going on in Acts 6. 1 Timothy 5 discusses responsibility towards some dependent saints. We have that responsibility. Now, we have the obligation to make good judgments. and to help those who are truly dependent. But we have that obligation. That is part of what we exist as a church for. The church is an expression of a spiritual family. We are members one of another. And we're all brethren. And we need to function in a way that recognizes that special need. I want to talk for a moment about identifying with the local congregation. I spoke at the outset tonight about the need for a congregation to know who is among them and who is not, so that we know who we have these special responsibilities for. The New Testament does not describe the modern membership systems that so many places have. It certainly doesn't describe contracts. Yes, there are some places out there that want you to sign a contract. Does not describe denominational structures, but it clearly presents identifiable association among believers, where people knew who was with them and who was not. Saul sought fellowship with the disciples. He was called Paul by the time this happened. He was Saul when he left Jerusalem. He was Paul when he got back to Jerusalem. And in Acts 9:26, when he came to Jerusalem, he was, and this is the important language, he was trying to associate with the disciples. And we talked about that this morning in terms of the importance of that, and that it is as it's presented in the Bible. But what we want to focus on tonight is this. Paul went out of his way, not just to be associated with the church, not just to go to an assembly of the church, but to associate with the members of the church. He was trying to associate with the disciples, is what it said. So after his conversion, he sought to join himself to the disciples. That's the language that's used in the King James, I believe. That doesn't mean that he pledged the local church and they voted on whether to accept him or not. That's not what it means when it says join the disciples. It means that he was trying to associate with them, to become a part of them, to become identified as one of them. The church, in this case, exercised caution. Well, why were they cautious? Well, because the last time they knew this man, he was persecuting Christians. He was having them put in jail. He was going out looking for them to bring them back and have them put in jail. He was consenting to their death. He was assisting the people who were stoning them to death. He most likely participated in putting some of them to death. And so they were cautious. And there's no corrective language in the Bible about that. There's corrective action that was taken by someone who knew him. Someone who then went to the brethren and said, "This is a faithful man. These are the things that he has done. This is the fruit of his repentance. You can see the change in his life. You can now trust him and associate with him and receive him as a brother." And they did that. I don't think that there is a proper procedure. I just saw that question be asked the other day at a closed group on a social media platform that I'm a part of that's largely made up of preachers. Hey, what is y'all's procedure for folks placing membership? I don't know that there is a proper procedure, but this text alone in Acts 9 shows that it's important, and there needs both to be fellowship and discernment in fellowship. And if you add to that 1 Corinthians 5, where he corrects a group because they were accepting someone among them who was practicing things and was unwilling to repent that were so egregious, he said, that even the world would not have accepted the behavior, and they did nothing about it. They said, no, you need to identify that one and not have fellowship with them. We have to be able to identify and have some kind of process in which to determine identifiable fellowship. Identifiable fellowship serves spiritual purposes. When Christians commit themselves to a faithful congregation, it creates some things. Number one, it creates accountability. I know who you are. You know who I am. We are around each other. We see each other. We see what one another are doing, and we are there, able to challenge, able to encourage, able to confront when necessary. When Paul and Peter were in the same place, among the same group of Christians, and Peter was doing something that was not right, Paul withstood him to his face. That accountability was only possible because of their association. Encouragement, only possible with association. Shared labor is only possible if you know who is among you. And it should not be the case. I'm going to tell you something. This is a long-standing rule that gets applied in a lot of areas, but it is talked about in the church as well. 90% of the work gets done by 10% of the people. That is not the way it should be in the church of the Lord. There should be shared labor, shared responsibility, and everyone should do their part. Spiritual support, only possible if you know those who can. You support everyone on the earth? Can you maintain a relationship with everyone on the earth? Can you help everyone? Can you bear the burdens of everyone on the earth? Can you confront every wrong that's done in the world? No. Can you remove yourself from association with every evil that's done in the world? So you'll be remember, possibly Jesus himself told his disciples. All right, actually, I shouldn't say it that way. Paul, in the letter that he wrote to the church, when he told them that they should remove someone from their midst, he said, I did not at all mean the people of the world, or else you would need to leave the world. I meant a so-called brother who is doing such things. We cannot provide support to every living human being. So we have to know the ones who we have the special obligation to support are. Meaningful relationships. That's another one. People can talk. I mean, I don't even know, I lost count. I got 1,000 people that have sent me friend requests on Facebook, and I got 2,000, 2,500 people that are my friends on Facebook. I don't know those people. I can't maintain 2,000 friendships. To have real meaningful relationships, you have to know who the people are, and you have to spend time and effort to develop those relationships. The issue is not institutional formality. It's not about an organization or a place or a membership role. That's not why it's done. The issue is about faithful participation among God's people. That's why it's done. That's why it has to be done. When he wrote the letter to the church at Corinth, or to the church at Thessalonica, or to the church at Philippi, and said, read this to all the brothers, you have to know who they are in order to read it to them. You have to know who they are in order to know who it's addressed to. And finally, the danger in neglecting the church needs to be talked about. Christians who isolate themselves place themselves in very, very grave danger. Without encouragement, there is no way that we will complete the course that is set before us. I think I mentioned this morning Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 20. You can make an argument that we're not going to perfectly complete the course, even with encouragement. What I'm suggesting to you is it's impossible. It's impossible for us to finish the course on our own. We're in grave danger if we separate ourselves from all accountability. And listen, I have seen this done in practice. I have seen people intentionally move from place to place to avoid accountability. It's a little harder to do that here than it is some places, but I've seen it happen. And I've been told by people when I went and talked to them about things, oh, I'm not a member here. Now, they attended all the time, but when one of the brothers wanted to hold them accountable for obligations, the response was, oh, I'm not a member here. So I don't have those obligations, and you can't correct me. We put ourselves in very, very grave danger if we are not held accountable for our obligations and what we ought to do. Without encouragement, without accountability, without fellowship, people easily become discouraged. Listen, I become discouraged sometimes with people who are encouraging me. There are plenty of people who encourage me, and I still at times struggle with frustrations and discouragement. Spiritually weak, really easy to become spiritually weak if I'm not being held accountable. Vulnerabilities to error, no guideposts, no awareness. You know, a baseball field. You ever notice on a baseball field something happens outside the base path? It's usually dirt, but more importantly, along the outfield wall, there is I forget how many feet it is now. It's been too long since I played. But there is a tract of dirt. The grass stops and there's a tract of dirt from there to the wall. You know what that's called? The warning track. Because when you are in the middle of a game and you are chasing a fly ball, you're not paying attention to where anything else is around you. You're staring at the ball. And the reason that is there is so as someone is running toward that wall, they become aware that they're getting close to the wall and they need to start paying attention or they're going to end up hurting themselves. It's called a warning track. That is one of the services we provide one another. We warn one another. You might want to think about that. You might consider what this passage of scripture says. You might want to examine whether or not that is the way that a Christian should act. Warnings that may very well save our soul one day. Scripture repeatedly warns believers about drifting away from faithfulness. Look with me in the book of Hebrews, Hebrews chapter 3. Look at verses 12 and 13. Watch out, brothers and sisters, so there won't be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage each other daily while it is still called today, so that none of you is hardened by sin's deception. Drifting away from faithfulness is very easy. So he says you need You need to encourage one another. You need to warn one another. You need to be there to hold one another accountable, lest any one of you should drift away. God designed local churches to help one another remain faithful. That's why he gave them. It's what he built them for. That's what the roles that he placed within them are for. As I made the comment this morning, if we could do it on our own, he would have left it that way. We cannot do it on our own. The church is made up of imperfect people. This is also a common thing you hear among preachers when they're talking to one another, especially if it's an older preacher talking to a younger preacher, and there's trouble and difficulty, and the younger preacher's discouraged, and he's looking at the greener grass on the other side of the fence and saying, "Boy, I wish I could be somewhere where things were like they ought to be, and I didn't have to worry about all these troubles." And what the older preacher will almost always say is, "Look, there is no perfect congregation, and if there was one, they wouldn't have you, because if they took you, it wouldn't be perfect anymore." We are made up of imperfect people, and every congregation sees problems because people sin. That's just the reality. The New Testament consistently presents Christians as worshiping together, as working together, as encouraging one another, so that more saints remain faithful than would otherwise. Some will be lost, not just some in the world, some among us will drift away from the faith, will become unfaithful. We're no longer be. We got people that live in this town that used to be among us that are no longer among us, and many of them are no longer anywhere. It happens. We're here and we're worshiping together and working together and encouraging one another and bearing one another's burdens and exhorting one another so that more of us remain faithful than would if we were doing this by ourselves. Do you remember that scene of Elijah the prophet when he sat down under the terebinth tree and he asked God to take his life? You remember why he was so discouraged and why he wanted God to take his life? Because he thought he was the only one. He understood that fellowship with others would make all the difference. And do you know what God said to him to encourage him? There are yet 7,000 others who have not bowed the knee to Baal. You are not the only faithful person. If he had been around those 7,000 others, if he had been engaged with them, if he had been walking with them and working with them, and they had been helping bear his burdens, and he had been helping bear their burdens, and they had been laboring together, he might not have found himself sitting under a tree wishing God would take his life. The question is not whether we claim to belong to Christ. The world is full of people who claim to belong to Christ. The question is whether we're willing to walk with his people, to labor beside them, to take seriously the responsibilities that God has given to us, both as individuals and as collective bodies. It is the local church that is a pillar and the buttress of the truth. It is not any individual. Revelation chapter 1 and verse 20, it says, "Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me." Let's go ahead and tell you the voice that was speaking to him was the Lamb. I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. It is the churches that are the lampstands in this world. We hold the light. It's in the local church that the light of truth shines out of into the world. And it is when unbelievers come in amongst us collectively and they look around and they say, surely the Lord is among them, that we have the opportunity to share a message that can transform their life, remake their mind, and change the direction of their lives forever. As we talked about this morning in the Bible class, that great judgment that we will all stand before, it has eternal consequences. Appreciating and being a true church with all of the ups and the downs and the goods and the bads and the struggles and the warts and all of being a true church that is dedicated. Well, I heard of a congregation recently that told a fellow that was going to work with them, we are a messy church. We want you to understand that right now. We're a messy church. I said, that's perfectly fine as long as you don't want to stay messy. If we will be the kind of place that invites in people with their messes, and then we help one another clean up their messes and help them maintain fellowship with God and help them overcome their weaknesses and their failures and help them learn where they lack knowledge and allow them to share where they have knowledge, we can change people's life eternally. Because when you stand before God in the day of judgment and you hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant, enter into the glories of your Father, that is going to be eternal blessings. But if you stand before him and he says, depart from me, I never knew you, workers of iniquity, that is going to be eternal punishment. And it'll never change. It'll never change for them. We have a unique opportunity as a body of people to work and function in this community in a way that we can actually help people avoid the one and enjoy the other. But it takes commitment and it takes being together and it takes coming together and it takes working together and it takes encouraging and lifting up and bearing and all the other things that we've talked about today. And a commitment to do that, not once in a while, not occasionally, but as the passage we read in Hebrews just a moment ago, encouraging one another day by day. We do that, we'll all be able to see that day of glory. And we'll be able to help others see it as well. Lessons yours for your consideration. I appreciate everybody's participation. I hope this has been somewhat beneficial for you today. It really is important. I'll go ahead and tell you, because this is a lesson that's probably going to get taught next week. The other thing that I would have talked about tonight is the peace of the faithful, the peace that we enjoy, and confidence that we enjoy being among the faithful. And maybe that'll be next Sunday morning's lesson. There is such value to being a child of God. It's a lot of work, and there are days that it's hard, and there are days that it's frustrating, and there are days that you feel like you are swimming against the stream and the stream is flooded. But it is worth every moment when you see the light come on. You see the change take place in someone, and you know that you have just had a small part in helping snatch someone out of the fire. Think about these things. If we can help you in any way, if you'd let it be known as we stand and sing, we will.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Granted, Jesus is my plea.